Hello and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into 5 absolutely fascinating stories. These are the kinds of mysteries that sit right on the edge of what we think we know, from lost history all the way to paranormal artifacts. I mean, really think about that question. What if the story we've all been told is missing some huge, crucial chapters? Each mystery we're about to look at today really pokes holes in the official narrative, whether we're talking about geology, archaeology, or even things that have happened in our own lifetime. All right, so here's our roadmap. We're gonna journey from the frozen deserts of Antarctica all the way to the sandy deserts of Egypt. Then we'll explore a seemingly normal suburban home that's packed with cursed objects. We'll investigate a biblical catastrophe. And finally, we'll uncover a library that was literally saved by a volcano. Okay, let's kick things off. Our first mystery takes us to what is without a doubt the most hostile place on the entire planet, Antarctica. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. An average daily temperature of negative 49 degrees Fahrenheit, not to mention winds that can scream past 100 miles per hour. So for decades, the scientific consensus has been pretty simple. No way could any ancient civilization have possibly survived here. But what if that whole idea was just plain wrong? So in 2016, satellite images revealed these absolutely incredible formations just poking through the ice sheet. Researchers who looked at them said they looked exactly like the pyramids in Egypt, but they were way, way bigger. One of them is said to have a perfectly square base that is 2 kilometers on each side. That's just massive. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Mainstream geology has always said Antarctica has been frozen solid for millions of years. But in 2017, some German scientists drilled into the seafloor and found, wait for it, over 60 different types of plants you'd find in a rainforest. This new evidence suggests that parts of Antarctica could have been totally ice-free until as recently as 4000 BC. And that lines up spookily well with ancient Polynesian legends of a lost ancestral homeland, a place they described as having white rocks coming out of the water. All right, so from a mystery frozen in ice, we're now traveling to one that was buried in sand. We're in Egypt, looking at a monument we all think we know, the Great Sphinx. So the official story, the one in all the textbooks, is that the Sphinx was built around 2500 BC. But here's the wild part. For most of its known history, it was buried. When Napoleon showed up, only its head and shoulders were sticking out of the sand. It wasn't fully dug out until the 1920s, and that's when a brand new story started to emerge, one that pushes its origins way, way back in time. And here's where the whole story just takes a radical left turn. This is the core geological evidence. The pyramids and the other structures out there on the Giza Plateau, they show classic wind erosion. It's exactly what you'd expect in a desert. But the Sphinx itself and the walls of the pit it sits in show something totally different. Deep, vertical cracks caused by massive, prolonged rainfall. A geologist named Robert Schoch studied this weathering back in the 90s, and he concluded there's only one way to explain it. The Sphinx must have existed when the Sahara was a temperate, rainy climate. That would push its construction all the way back to the end of the last ice age. And if that's true, it doesn't just rewrite Egyptian history, it rewrites human history. It means some sophisticated culture capable of building this monster existed thousands of years earlier than we ever thought was possible. Okay, let's take a sharp turn. We're leaving ancient monuments behind and heading to a modern suburban home in Ohio that just happens to house a collection of the world's most cursed objects. So meet Greg and Dana Newkirk. Now, they didn't actually set out to collect cursed stuff. They're researchers of the paranormal. They call it high strangeness, and they just investigated unexplained phenomena. But over time, people who are being haunted by objects started sending them things, literally begging them to just take these things off their hands. Their most dangerous artifact was a wooden carving they called the crone. Some hikers found it in the cave, and after they brought it home, they started experiencing terrifying things, like seeing wet footprints just appear on the ground. They sent it to the Newkirks, but its influence was so intense that one visitor had a violent seizure just from being near it. It got so bad, they actually had to take it back out to the wild and perform a ritual to cleanse it. And believe me, that's just one story. Their collection has a deer skull that's been linked to employee sickness and a building collapse, a ring that supposedly kills its wearer, and even a Bible from an exorcism that went horribly wrong. People have had these visceral, physical reactions just being in the same room as these objects, fainting, throwing up, intense anxiety. It's nuts.
So that brings us to our next question. What happens when it's not just one object, but an entire city that seems cursed? We're now going to dig into whether one of the most famous stories in the Bible might actually be a literal historical account.
So, archaeologists have unearthed the ruins of this huge ancient city in the Jordan River Valley called Tal el Hammam. And get this, it matches the biblical description of Sodom's location perfectly, north of the Dead Sea, east of Jerusalem. And the evidence they found there, it points to an absolutely unimaginable catastrophe.
So, what's the evidence? Well, the science points to a single cataclysmic event. Archaeologists found pottery that was melted into glass, tiny little spheres of vaporized sand, and a super high concentration of rare elements you only find in asteroids. And to top it all off, the entire site is buried under a thick layer of salt, chemically identical to the salt from the Dead Sea. The theory is just staggering. A meteor exploded in the air right above the city, instantly vaporizing it and blasting a wave of superheated brine across the entire landscape. And for our final mystery, we're going to look at how one of history's most famous disasters became an unlikely savior of knowledge. It preserved a library that could literally rewrite what we know about the entire ancient world. When Mount Vesuvius erupted, it famously buried the Roman city of Herculaneum. Well, back in the 1750s, excavators found a luxurious villa containing over 1,800 papyrus scrolls. This is the only intact library to survive from all of antiquity. The only problem? They were basically carbonized, cooked into what looked like charcoal logs, completely unreadable. But now there's a new technology called virtual unwrapping. Scientists use these high-powered X-rays to scan the scrolls, and then incredibly sophisticated software virtually flattens the layers and reveals the text inside. They can finally read these 2,000-year-old documents without destroying them. It's amazing. So, what are they finding? So far, it's been mostly Greek philosophy, but the most tantalizing possibility, it lies in the timing. The villa was buried just 40 years after the death of Jesus. This means original copies of the Apostle Paul's letters could be hidden in that library. And if they are, they would be the earliest Christian texts ever discovered, predating anything we have now by centuries. So just think about what we've seen. We've looked at potential pyramids in a place that might have been a rainforest, a monument that could be thousands of years older than the history books claim, objects with a tangible, dangerous influence, a biblical story that seems to be confirmed by science, and a lost library that's finally about to be read. You know, each one of these anomalies just chips away at that neat, tidy version of the past we've all been told. It really leaves you wondering, what else is out there, just waiting to be discovered, that could completely rewrite the story of who we are?